Something absolutely catastrophic just happened in Beverly Hills, and the mainstream media is desperately trying to distract you from the real story. While you were scrolling through your feed, completely unaware, one of the most powerful women in entertainment barely escaped what could have been a bloodbath that would have shaken the entire foundation of the music industry. We're talking about Rihanna, the untouchable billionaire, the woman who built an empire from nothing, the artist who transcended music to become a cultural phenomenon. And right now, at this very moment in March 2026, she's running for her life. This isn't some dramatic exaggeration for views. This is the unfiltered reality of what happens when you know too much in an industry built on secrets, manipulation, and control. What went down at her Beverly Hills sanctuary wasn't just another celebrity security breach. This was a calculated, militaristic assault that had all the hallmarks of a professional intimidation operation designed to send a very specific message. Shut your mouth, or next time we won't miss. The weapon of choice? An AR-15 style assault rifle, a military-grade instrument of destruction specifically engineered for maximum penetration and lethality. The target? The front gates and walls of a mansion where 3 innocent children were playing, completely oblivious to the fact that high-velocity rounds were about to rip through their sanctuary. The timing? Precisely when Rihanna, her partner A$AP Rocky, and their entire family were home, vulnerable, and completely exposed to what could have been a massacre. And here's the part that should absolutely terrify you. The shooter wasn't some deranged, homeless person living in a cardboard box under a freeway overpass. This was Ivana Ortiz, a 35-year-old licensed speech pathologist from Orlando, Florida, who owned a legitimate business, has a Medicaid provider registration, and by all external appearances, had everything to lose. So ask yourself this critical question. What kind of motivation, what kind of payment, what kind of coercion would convince a professional woman to throw away her entire life, drive across the country in a white Tesla, and open fire on one of the most famous addresses in America? Before you dismiss this as just another conspiracy theory from the dark corners of the internet, understand that the streets are talking louder than they've talked in years. The industry insiders are whispering names. The connections are being drawn. And at the center of this entire spiderweb of corruption, violence, and intimidation sits one name that keeps emerging from the shadows. Jay-Z, the man who built Rihanna, the mogul who profited billions from her talent, and now potentially the architect behind her silencing. If you're new here, smash that like button right now and subscribe, because what I'm about to reveal has been systematically suppressed by powerful forces who have unlimited resources to make stories like this disappear. The algorithm is actively fighting against this content reaching your feed. They don't want you connecting these dots. They don't want you asking the uncomfortable questions. But we're going to ask them anyway, because Rihanna's children deserve to grow up in a world where truth matters more than protecting billionaire reputations. To understand the sheer magnitude of what transpired on that Sunday afternoon, you need to comprehend the level of planning, intelligence, and precision that went into this operation. Beverly Hills isn't some random neighborhood where you can just accidentally stumble upon a celebrity's house. These estates are hidden behind layers of security, winding canyon roads that only locals understand, and gates that don't even have visible addresses. The homes of the ultra-wealthy are specifically designed to be fortresses, invisible to the outside world, accessible only to those with specific knowledge. Rihanna's property in particular represents the pinnacle of privacy and security. After years of being hunted by paparazzi, stalked by obsessive fans, and having her every movement documented and dissected by the media, she specifically chose this location to escape the madness of fame. This was supposed to be her safe haven, the one place on earth where she could simply be a mother, where her children could play without fear, where she and Rocky could build a normal family life away from the cameras and the chaos. The architectural design of these Beverly Hills compounds is intentionally maze-like. You can't just pull up an address on Google Maps and follow the directions. The roads twist and turn through canyons. The properties are set back hundreds of feet from the street. The gates are reinforced steel, designed to withstand vehicle impacts. Security cameras monitor every angle. Private security firms patrol the neighborhoods. These are not accessible locations for random acts of violence. Yet Ivana Ortiz drove her white Tesla directly to Rihanna's gate at approximately 1:30 p.m. on Sunday, March 8, 2026, at the exact moment when the family was gathered inside. She didn't circle the block confused. She didn't stop to ask for directions. She didn't hesitate or second-guess her location. She drove with the confidence of someone who had been given precise coordinates, detailed instructions, and possibly even surveillance photographs showing the exact layout of the property. When she arrived, she didn't knock on the gate hoping to get a glimpse of her idol. She didn't hold up a sign professing her love. She pulled out an AR-15 style rifle, Not a handgun, not a shotgun, but specifically a weapon designed for penetrating barriers, and methodically fired nearly 10 rounds directly at the property. Witnesses reported hearing the distinctive rapid-fire cracks of the assault rifle echoing through the canyon. The sound was so shocking, so out of place in this neighborhood of manicured lawns and million-dollar silence, that neighbors initially thought it was construction equipment or fireworks. The bullet trajectory analysis conducted by the Los Angeles Police Department revealed something absolutely chilling. These weren't warning shots fired into the air. These weren't rounds aimed at the driveway or the landscaping. Multiple bullets struck the reinforced gate, leaving visible penetration marks. At least one round went to the gate entirely and struck a recreational vehicle parked on the property. Most horrifying of all, forensic analysts determined that at least one bullet achieved enough velocity and trajectory to penetrate through an exterior wall of the residence itself. Think about what that means for a moment. Rihanna's children, babies who are completely innocent, who have done nothing wrong except be born to a famous mother, were inside that home. They were playing, laughing, living their lives with a naive assumption that walls protect you from the outside world, and a high-velocity rifle round, specifically chosen for its penetrating power, went through that wall. If that bullet had been 6 inches lower, if it had been aimed at a different angle, if the children had been in a different room, we could be talking about a completely different story. We could be talking about funerals instead of arrests. The weapon choice itself reveals sophisticated planning. An AR-15 style rifle isn't something you grab on impulse. It's not a weapon you buy at a pawn shop on a whim. These are expensive, regulated firearms that require background checks, waiting periods, and specific knowledge to operate effectively. The person who armed Ivana, Ortiz, knew exactly what they were doing. They specifically chose a weapon that would penetrate the security barriers of a fortified celebrity compound. This was military-level tactical planning executed against a civilian target. After firing the rounds, Ortiz didn't stick around to admire her handiwork. She didn't wait for police. She calmly got back into her white Tesla, a vehicle that cost upwards of $70,000, hardly the ride of someone acting on mental illness alone, and drove away. She drove approximately 3 miles to the Sherman Oaks Galleria, parked her car, and attempted to blend into the shopping crowds as if nothing had happened. She believed she could just disappear. She believed she had enough protection, enough cover, enough support from whoever sent her to evade consequences. She was wrong. The Los Angeles Police Department, working with federal agencies who had already been monitoring the situation for reasons we'll discuss later, tracked her vehicle using the extensive camera network that monitors every major intersection in Los Angeles. They found her at the mall, arrested her without incident, and began the process of unraveling what is shaping up to be one of the most explosive criminal conspiracies in entertainment history. The arraignment revealed the severity of the situation. Bail was set at $10.2 million. Let me repeat that number because it's absolutely unprecedented for an attempted shooting where nobody was physically injured. $10,200,000. District attorneys don't request that kind of bail for random acts of violence by mentally ill individuals. That's the kind of bail reserved for international drug traffickers, organized crime leaders, and defendants who pose extreme ongoing threats to public safety. The judge clearly knows something we don't. The prosecution clearly has evidence suggesting this goes far beyond one disturbed woman with a rifle. Ivana Ortiz is currently facing 14 separate felony charges, including multiple counts of attempted murder, assault with a deadly weapon, and firearms violations that carry mandatory minimum sentences. If convicted on all counts, she's looking at life in prison without the possibility of parole. For a 35-year-old professional woman with a business, a career, and presumably a future, that's a death sentence. So again, we have to ask, what could possibly motivate someone to throw away their entire existence? Money? Blackmail? Threats against her own family? Or loyalty to someone so powerful that she believed they can make the consequences disappear? This is where the story transitions from a shocking crime to a potential industry-wide conspiracy that could bring down empires. Because while the mainstream media wants to focus on Ivana Ortiz's mental health history and paint this as an isolated incident of celebrity obsession, the internet sleuths and industry insiders are connecting it that lead to some of the most powerful figures in music history. The name that keeps emerging from the digital underground, whispered in encrypted chat rooms and discussed in hushed tones by people who understand how the industry really operates, is Sean Carter, better known to the world as Jay-Z. The same Jay-Z who discovered Rihanna when she was just a teenage girl from Barbados. The same Jay-Z who signed her to Def Jam Recordings when he was president of the label. The same Jay-Z whose Roc Nation management company still controls significant portions of her business empire. The same Jay-Z who has profited billions of dollars from Rihanna's talent, image, and brand. Now, I want to be absolutely clear about something before we go any further. I am not stating as absolute fact that Jay-Z orchestrated this attack. What I am doing is examining the circumstantial evidence, the timeline, the connections, and the suspicious patterns that are emerging in real time. Because when you're dealing with powerful people who have unlimited resources to manipulate narratives, hide evidence, and silence witnesses, you have to read between the lines. You have to look at what's not being said just as carefully as what is. Let's start with the most disturbing element, the timing. Why now? Why? After years of relative peace where Rihanna has focused on her business empire and her family, would someone suddenly launch a military-style assault on her home? What changed in the landscape of power dynamics to make Rihanna suddenly vulnerable, suddenly a target, suddenly someone who needed to be intimidated or potentially eliminated? The answer may lie in what's been happening in the broader entertainment industry over the past 2 years. We've witnessed the systematic exposure and prosecution of previously untouchable figures. Sean Diddy Combs is currently facing federal racketeering charges related to decades of alleged abuse, trafficking, and criminal enterprise. R. Kelly is serving decades in prison for systematic sexual abuse. Harvey Weinstein's empire crumbled when victims finally found the courage to speak. Jeffrey Epstein's network of powerful abusers was partially exposed before his convenient death in custody. There's a pattern emerging. The old guard of powerful men who built their empires on secrets, abuse, and intimidation is finally facing consequences. And when one domino falls, the others start to shake, because these men didn't operate in isolation. They had networks, relationships, overlapping circles of privilege and protection. When federal investigators start pulling on one thread, the entire sweater begins to unravel. Rihanna occupies a unique position in this ecosystem. She's not just any artist who can be dismissed or discredited. She's a billionaire businesswoman with her own empire, completely separate from the music industry. She has Fenty Beauty, Savage X Fenty, and a portfolio of businesses that generate hundreds of millions in revenue annually. She doesn't need the music industry anymore, which means she doesn't need to stay silent to protect her career. She has the financial independence to tell the truth without fear of being blacklisted or losing income streams. More importantly, Rihanna was there during a very specific era of the music industry. She was young, beautiful, vulnerable, and surrounded by powerful older men during some of the most excessive years of industry debauchery. She attended the parties. She traveled on the private jets. She was backstage at the events where the cameras weren't rolling. If anyone has firsthand knowledge of what really happened during those years, who was involved, what crimes were committed, which powerful figures participated in activities they spent millions trying to keep buried, it would be Rihanna. The streets are talking specifically about the Epstein connection. For those who don't know or have somehow avoided this story, Jeffrey Epstein was a financier who operated a sex trafficking ring that catered to some of the most powerful men in the world: politicians, business moguls, and yes, entertainment industry figures. His private island in the Caribbean was nicknamed Pedophile Island for good reason. Flight logs of that island, witness testimonies, and court documents have revealed a network of complicity that stretches into every corner of elite society. Rumors have circulated for months that additional unsealed documents related to the Epstein case are coming. These documents allegedly contain names that have been protected until now. People who were passengers on the planes, visitors to the island, participants in activities that would destroy reputations and potentially lead to criminal charges. If Rihanna's name appears in those documents, not as a perpetrator, but as a witness, as someone who was brought to events or locations where she observed criminal activity, she becomes the most dangerous person in the world to certain powerful individuals. A testifying Rihanna would have instant credibility. She has no criminal record. She has no history of making false allegations. She's beloved by hundreds of millions of people around the world. If she were to stand in front of a grand jury or in a courtroom and say, "I was at this location on this date and I witnessed this person doing this activity," it would be game over for whoever she named. There would be no spinning it, no PR campaign to discredit her, no way to make it disappear. Her testimony would be nuclear. This creates a very specific kind of danger for people who have spent decades building empires on the assumption that their secrets would remain buried. If you're someone who has something to hide, someone who participated in activities that would lead to criminal prosecution and social destruction, Rihanna becomes an existential threat. And when you're facing the potential loss of billions of dollars, your freedom, your legacy, and everything you built, suddenly a $10,000 payment to a mentally vulnerable person with a rifle starts to look like a cost-effective insurance policy. Now, let's talk about the Jay-Z silence specifically. In the days since the shooting, when one of the most valuable artists he ever worked with nearly lost her life, and her children nearly became orphans, Jay-Z has been completely silent. No public statement, no tweet expressing concern, no Instagram post condemning the violence, no offer of additional security or support, just deafening, calculated silence. For a man who has built his entire brand on loyalty, on the idea that Roc Nation is a family that protects its own, this silence is absolutely deafening. When other artists have faced far less serious threats, Jay-Z has been quick to release statements and rally support. But when Rihanna, the woman who made him potentially $1 billion through her music alone, faces an assassination attempt, he goes dark. That's not an oversight. That's a choice. And choices like that tell you everything you need to know about someone's actual priorities. The internet is ablaze with speculation. Comment sections are filled with people saying, Jay-Z set this up. Jay-Z is next after Diddy. The feds are coming for HOV. These aren't just random conspiracy theorists throwing darts at a board. These are fans who have watched the industry for decades, who understand the language of power moves and intimidation tactics, who recognize when something smells wrong. There's also chatter about a woman named Alvarez, who allegedly has connections to both Ortiz and the camp, presumed to mean Jay-Z circle. I haven't been able to independently verify these connections yet, but the fact that the specific name keeps appearing in underground forums and encrypted chats suggests there may be substance behind it. If federal investigators are able to trace financial transfers, phone records, or communication between Ortiz and this Alvarez person, and then further connect Alvarez to Jay-Z's organization, we're looking at a conspiracy charge that would dwarf anything we've seen in hip-hop since the RICO case against Young Thug's YSL label. Let's also discuss Rihanna's response to this incident, because it tells us everything about her state of mind. According to sources close to the family, Rihanna has fled California entirely. She's reportedly staying in an undisclosed location on the East Coast, surrounded by private security that she's paying for independently rather than relying on any industry connections. She's traumatized, she's scared for her children, and most importantly, she's furious. People who have spoken with her camp say she's done playing games. She's done staying silent about things she witnessed years ago. She's done protecting people who clearly aren't protecting her. If this attack was designed to scare her into continued silence, it may have achieved exactly the opposite effect. It may have pushed her past a breaking point where self-preservation means burning down the entire corrupt structure. Consequences be damned. Let's talk about the forensic evidence that's going to either confirm or destroy the conspiracy theories swirling around this case. Because in the modern era, it's nearly impossible to commit a crime without leaving a digital trail. And Ivana Ortiz left one hell of a trail. First, the weapon. The AR-15 style rifle she used isn't something you can buy anonymously at a gun show without paperwork. Federal law requires background checks for all firearms purchases from licensed dealers. Even private sales in most states require some form of documentation. So there's a paper trail showing where this rifle came from, who purchased it, when it was purchased, where it was registered, and how it ended up in Ortiz's possession. If the rifle was purchased by Ortiz herself, investigators will want to know when she bought it and why. Did she purchase it specifically for this attack, or has she owned it for years? If she's owned it for years, that suggests premeditation and planning that goes beyond a sudden mental break. If she purchased it recently, that suggests this was a planned operation with a specific target and timeline. If the rifle wasn't purchased by Ortiz, if it was provided to her by someone else, that's even more damning. That means there's another person involved in this conspiracy, someone who armed her for this specific purpose. And if investigators can trace that person, they can start building the network upward to whoever ultimately ordered the hit. Second, the vehicle. The white Tesla is a gold mine of forensic evidence that's going to be absolutely devastating for anyone involved in this conspiracy. For those who don't know, Tesla vehicles are essentially rolling surveillance systems. They have cameras pointing in every direction, front, back, both sides. Those cameras are constantly recording when the vehicle is in operation. They capture everything. Where you go, who you meet with, what you do when you think nobody's watching. The Los Angeles Police Department has already seized a hard drive from Ortiz's Tesla, and they're conducting a complete forensic analysis of every mile she drove in the days and weeks leading up to the attack. This footage will show if she conducted surveillance of Rihanna's property before the shooting. It will show if she met with anyone to receive instructions or payment. It will show if she practiced at a shooting range. It will document every single moment of her journey from Florida to California, creating an irrefutable timeline of her activities. If that footage shows Ortiz meeting with anyone connected to Jay-Z's organization, it's game over. If it shows her receiving a package or a briefcase in a parking lot somewhere, That's evidence of conspiracy. If it shows her sitting in her car outside Rihanna's house days before the attack, that's evidence of premeditation. And all of this footage is time-stamped, GPS tagged, and stored in a format that's virtually impossible to alter without leaving forensic traces. Third, the digital communications. Ortiz had a smartphone, and that smartphone is now in the possession of federal investigators who specialize in extracting deleted messages, call records, location data, and app communications. Even if she deleted her text messages with whoever coordinated this attack, forensic specialists can recover them. Even if she used encrypted messaging apps like Signal or Telegram, metadata still exists showing who she was communicating with and when. Phone records will show every call she made and received in the months leading up to the attack. Cell tower data will show everywhere her phone physically traveled. Banking records will show any unusual deposits or withdrawals that could indicate payment for her services. Credit card statements will show her purchases, including any surveillance equipment, ammunition, or travel expenses. This is a kind of evidence that destroys conspiracy theories when they're false, or confirms them absolutely when they're true. Within a few weeks, federal investigators are going to have a complete picture of Rihanna Ortiz's life leading up to this attack. They're going to know everyone she communicated with, everywhere she went, and everything she purchased. If this was truly the random act of a mentally ill individual with no outside coordination, the evidence will show isolation, erratic behavior, and lack of external contact. But if this was a coordinated hit ordered by someone powerful, the evidence is going to lead investigators directly to that person. The fact that bail was set at over $10 million suggests the prosecution already has some of this evidence, and it's damning. Judges don't set bail that high based on speculation or vibes. They set it that high when they reviewed probable cause affidavits showing evidence of serious, organized criminal activity involving multiple parties. To understand why the Jay-Z connection isn't just conspiracy theory nonsense, but rather a reasonable hypothesis based on historical patterns, we need to examine the documented history of violence, intimidation, and witness elimination in the music industry. Because this isn't the first time someone who knew too much ended up in danger. Let's start with Kim Porter, Diddy's ex-girlfriend and mother of his children. She died suddenly in 2018 from what was officially ruled as pneumonia. On the surface, a tragic but explainable death. But those close to the situation have long whispered that Kim knew things. Things about Diddy's business practices, things about industry parties, things about criminal activities. She had allegedly been working on a tell-all book before her death. That book never materialized. She died suddenly, and Diddy got to control the narrative of her legacy. There's Shakir Stewart, a Def Jam executive who worked closely with both Jay-Z and L.A. Reid, who died from an alleged self-inflicted gunshot wound in 2008. He was 34 years old, at the peak of his career, with no public history of mental illness or suicidal ideation. He died right when major label restructuring was happening, right when secrets about business practices and artist exploitation were at risk of exposure. There's a mysterious circumstances around the deaths of numerous artists and industry figures who were connected to powerful moguls right at moments when they might have become liabilities rather than assets. I'm not saying Jay-Z is responsible for any specific death. I'm saying there's a documented pattern in this industry where people who become inconvenient have a habit of ending up dead or discredited. The intimidation tactics are even more common than actual violence. Artists get blackballed from radio play. Producers who speak out suddenly can't get studio time. Managers who challenge the system find their other clients mysteriously leaving them. The industry has sophisticated mechanisms for destroying people's careers and lives without ever throwing a punch. Rihanna is different because she's reached a level of power and wealth where traditional industry blackball tactics don't work. You can't hurt her financially. She's a billionaire independently of music. You can't destroy her reputation. She's beloved globally and has built that reputation over 2 decades. You can't prevent her from speaking. She has social media platforms with hundreds of millions of followers where she can reach people directly without needing industry gatekeepers. So, what do you do when someone has that much power, that much independence, that much credibility, and they're threatening to tell the truth about things you desperately need kept secret? You go after the only thing they care about more than their own life, their family. You send a message that says, "We can't touch you, but we can touch your children." It's the oldest intimidation tactic in the book, and it's the most effective because there's nothing a parent won't sacrifice to protect their kids. The targeting of Rihanna's home specifically when her children were present is the most damning aspect of this entire incident. If this was truly just a deranged fan who wanted Rihanna's attention, why not show up at a public appearance? Why not try to access her during a Fenty Beauty event? Why not stake out a restaurant she's known to frequent? Why specifically drive to her private residence? the one place she guards most carefully, the one place where her children are vulnerable, and open fire. Because the message wasn't, "I want your attention." The message was, "I can get to your babies." That's not fan obsession. That's terrorism. That's psychological warfare, designed to break someone's will to resist. The next few months are going to be absolutely critical in determining whether this case remains an isolated incident or explodes into the biggest music industry scandal in history. There are several scenarios that could play out, each with massive implications. Scenario 1. Ivana Ortiz takes a plea deal and cooperates with investigators. If prosecutors offer her a deal where she serves 15 to 20 years instead of life in prison in exchange for testimony about who coordinated the attack, she might take it. People facing life sentences have incredible motivation to cooperate. If she names names and provides evidence linking this attack to Jay-Z or anyone in his organization, we're looking at federal conspiracy charges that could bring down an empire. Scenario 2. Ortiz refuses to cooperate, but the forensic evidence speaks for itself. The Tesla footage, phone records, and financial documents create an irrefutable trail leading to whoever coordinated this attack. Even without Ortiz's testimony, federal prosecutors could build a case based purely on physical and digital evidence. This is how they took down mob bosses in previous decades, following the money and the communications until the network is fully exposed. Scenario 3. The investigation stalls due to lack of evidence connecting Ortiz to any coordinating party. In this scenario, she truly was acting alone based on mental illness, and all the conspiracy theories amount to nothing. She gets convicted, serves life in prison, and the case closes. However, this scenario seems increasingly unlikely given the sophistication of the attack and the unusual circumstances surrounding it. Scenario 4. Rihanna decides she's had enough and starts talking publicly. She might do an interview with Oprah or Gayle King. She might release a statement through her publicist. She might testify in front of a grand jury investigating industry corruption. If she decides to burn it all down and expose everything she witnessed over the years, it will trigger a cascade of investigations that could implicate dozens of powerful figures. The smartest bet is on some combination of scenarios 1, 2, and 4. Ortiz will likely cooperate to reduce her sentence. The forensic evidence will support her testimony. And Rihanna, seeing that staying silent almost got her children killed, will decide that protecting them means destroying the system that created this danger in the first place. For Jay-Z, this is the nightmare scenario he's been trying to avoid for decades. He's built an image as a sophisticated businessman, the mogul who transcended street life to become corporate America approved. He's got partnerships with the NFL, investments in tech startups, a champagne brand, and a reputation as one of the smartest businessmen in entertainment. All of that crumbles if he's implicated in an attempted murder conspiracy against one of his former artists. His legal team is undoubtedly working overtime right now, conducting their own investigation to figure out how much evidence exists and how bad this could get. They're probably reaching out through intermediaries to assess whether Ortiz can be silenced through other means, additional money for her family, promises of support, threats if she cooperates. But all those tactics leave trails that federal investigators can follow. The Roc Nation brand is also in serious jeopardy. They represent dozens of high-profile artists who are probably having very uncomfortable conversations with their management teams right now. If you're an artist signed to Roc Nation and you're watching your CEO potentially involved in an attempted murder plot against a former client, you're going to be looking for the exit. Nobody wants to be associated with that kind of toxicity, and nobody wants to wonder if they might be next if they become inconvenient for the broader music industry. This could trigger a long overdue reckoning. For decades, the industry has operated on the assumption that power protects you from consequences, that you can abuse artists, exploit their talent, steal their money, and intimidate them into silence without facing legal accountability. The systematic exposure of Weinstein, Cosby, R. Kelly, Diddy, and potentially now Jay-Z signals that the old system is finally breaking down. Younger artists are watching this play out and learning lessons. They're learning to negotiate better contracts. They're learning to document everything. They're learning that loyalty to the industry means nothing if the industry views you as disposable. The next generation is going to be much harder to exploit because they've seen what happens when you trust the wrong people with your career and your safety. So here's where we stand in March 2026. Rihanna is in hiding, terrified for her children's safety. Ivana Ortiz is sitting in a jail cell facing life in prison, deciding whether to cooperate with investigators. Jay-Z is silent, surrounded by lawyers, hoping this blows over before the connections become public. Federal investigators are analyzing terabytes of forensic evidence that will either vindicate or condemn powerful people. and the entire music industry is holding its breath, waiting to see if this becomes a domino that brings down the remaining pillars of the old guard. The truth will emerge. It always does eventually. The question is how much damage gets done in the meantime, and how many more people get hurt before accountability finally arrives. For Rihanna, the choice is clear. Stay silent and live in fear forever, always looking over her shoulder, always wondering if the next attack will succeed, always sacrificing her peace and her children's safety to protect people who clearly don't care about protecting her. Or speak out, tell everything she knows, cooperate with investigators, and burn down the entire corrupt system, even if it means painting an even bigger target on her back in the short term. My prediction? She's going to talk. She's going to realize that the only way to truly protect her family is to eliminate the threat entirely by exposing everyone involved. She's going to sit down with federal prosecutors and give them everything, names, dates, locations, events she witnessed. And when she does, the music industry, as we know, is going to implode. For Jay-Z, the walls are closing in from multiple directions. The Diddy investigation is allegedly touching people in his circle. The Epstein documents are potentially being unsealed. And now there's an attempted murder investigation that might lead directly back to him. He's running out of places to hide and running out of ways to make this go away. The streets have already convicted him. The court of public opinion has turned decisively against the old guard of moguls who built empires on exploitation. The only question remaining is whether the legal system will deliver the accountability that culture has been demanding for years. This isn't the end of the story. This is the beginning of the final chapter. The chapter where secrets stop being protected, where witnesses stop being intimidated, where billion-dollar reputations crumble under the weight of truth, where mothers decide that protecting their children means destroying the monsters, regardless of the cost. Rihanna didn't ask for this fight. She built her empire, had her children, and tried to live in peace. But they came for her anyway. They brought military weapons to her front door. They put her babies at risk. And in doing so, they made the most catastrophic mistake possible. They gave her nothing left to lose. A person with nothing to lose is the most dangerous person in the world. And right now, Rihanna has nothing to lose and everything to expose. The people who thought they could intimidate her into silence are about to learn that some women don't break under pressure, they explode. And they take everyone down with them. So watch carefully over the next few weeks. Watch to see if Jay-Z breaks his silence. Watch to see if Ortiz cooperates with prosecutors. Watch to see if more names start getting leaked to the media. Watch to see if Rihanna makes any public statements or unusual legal moves. All of these will be signs of which direction this is heading. And if you made it this far, drop a like on this video and subscribe, because the mainstream media is absolutely going to try to bury this story. They're going to focus on the mental health angle. They're going to avoid asking the uncomfortable questions about who might have coordinated this attack. They're going to protect powerful people because powerful people own media companies. But we don't answer to corporate media. We answer to the truth. And the truth is that something absolutely sinister is happening in the music industry. Rihanna almost became another casualty, and the people responsible need to be exposed and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Comment below with your theories. Tell me if you think Jay-Z is actually involved or if this is all circumstantial. Tell me what you think Rihanna should do next. Tell me if you believe the justice system will actually hold powerful people accountable, or they'll find a way to make this disappear like they always do. Stay vigilant, stay informed, and most importantly, stay on the right side of history by demanding accountability for the powerful instead of making excuses for them. The game is changing. The old rules don't apply anymore. And Rihanna might just be the person who finally breaks the system that's been broken for far too long.